Hello there, folks. Welcome, welcome. The Ready to Race community featuring the one and only yours truly, the man you're listening to right this moment, Bumblebee. Once again. My apologies there, folks. It was just a quick warm-up. Now we're back to the action here with the qualifying race session. And as we watch the racers go out once again for their out laps, just a quick reminder of who's the man to beat and who's going to be at the top of the leaderboard right now as it stands in terms of points. Right now it's going to be the Ferraris, RTR Pearlin 117 and RTR Atron Senna, tied with 57 points for P1. RTR Tyke is going to be in P3 or P2 depending on how you look at it with 41 points. Vornax in P4. We're going to put RTR Tyke in P3. That's how we decided to put it down in our league points. Vornax is going to be in P4 with 34 points. RTR Mad Max in P5 with 30. His partner just behind him, RTR ID 78 in P6 with 28 points. TGT Fab GT Lap 1 in P6 with 28 points. Lucas Mas in P8 with 22 points. Awarded to MTX 069. He's going to be in P9 at the moment. Be Racing number 1, who's with us today, in P9 as well with 22 points. They're also going to be tied for that position. Largo K in P11 with 11 points accordingly. Ferrari Glenn was in P12 with 5, and RTR Shooter and JJ GTI 90. They're going to be in P13 and 14 with no points to their name so far. All of these drivers still under outlap. Patiently waiting for their flying lap to begin. We're watching RTR Tyke at the moment in one of the Lamborghinis. Just about going to be done with his outlap very, very shortly. Let's stick here with RTR Tyke as he begins his flying lap. Let's see what kind of lap time he decides to put down right now. Which may kind of set the pace, if you will. Well, I guess not really. I mean, after all, a lot of people can just simply put down a much better lap time behind them, so. Down that hairpin that we mentioned again. It's going to be a very fun one to see later on. See if we can catch somebody going down there. Let's stick with Vornax here in the Citroen if you guys want to take a look at how that hairpin looks from this view. Very fun one to see. Much more entertaining when you're the actual person taking the turn. Lucas Mas 22. We're going to be watching him for just a moment as well. He's about a minute and 40 seconds into his flying lap in the other Lamborghini. Racing partner of RTR, Tyke. As he approaches the finish line, let's see which time he puts down to begin with a 154.107. Earning him P5 at the moment. Check out B Racing number 1, who's currently in P7, putting down his first flying lap time. Let's stick with him for just a while. See how he's doing today on this track. Notice a lot of the midfield racers tend to vary sometimes in their performance depending on the track. A lot of these racers, certainly, as most drivers, have their favorite tracks. And as other racers start putting down their flying lap times, B Racing number 1 dropping down to P8. For now, though, that can still change with just over 10 minutes left in this race session. And for those of you who don't know, 3 races into this championship already. Just a friendly reminder of how we have the class system this time. B Racing number 1, if you can take a look sometimes on his sides of his vehicle, you can see that red sticker as he is a pro racer. Racers like RTR, Mad Max, Vornax, Ferrari, Glenn would be racers that are pro racers. And racers that you wouldn't see here because they'd be in the other league would be racers like AMMS, or sorry, would be racers probably like RTR Race 1984, for example. That would be one racer that we can mention, one of the AM racers racing in the other league, side by side to us. Although unfortunately I can only commentate for one at a time. Well, we're definitely going to find a way to get those guys on our Instagram and on our YouTube and Facebook, so they also get some screen time, so you guys can see the action that you're missing in that league as well. He racing on another outlap, switching up his tires, probably just getting brand new ones, trying to put down yet again another good flying lap. Carolyn 117 putting down purple sectors at the moment on this particular flying lap. And as most racers, he's going to be on racing softs. Most of these racers stick to the racing softs, obviously, for their qualifying lap time, as you get the best performance out of these tires. RTR Tyke slowing down there. Maybe not happy with his performance on this lap time. Maybe just going into the pits, fixing something up. We'll find out in just a moment. RTR ID78, as you can see, going into the pits as well. Probably brand new tires, as well as several other racers. Lucas Mass 22, Vornax. We're still watching RTR Pearland 117 putting down still purple sectors here. Minute and 30 into his flying lap now. He's just going to be going down turn 17 and down that short little straight right before that finish line. Not the longest one on the track. We'll point that one out to you again in just a moment. 152.56. Not the best of the session, but a personal best for him. His partner RTR Adrian Senna is still going to be the man to beat with a 152.49. A little bit of a nose wobble there for Pearland 117. Although he only has worn out his tires just slightly, it still will make a difference, especially when it comes to qualifying lap times. RTR tight going into the pits just like we predicted there, just probably getting brand new tires. Nothing wrong with his car, of course. And out he goes. We'll get back to him once he finishes his outlap. Moving to another pro racer, the other Lamborghini racer, Lucas Mass 22, going around that drop and that hairpin that we enjoy seeing at this track. He's still going to be on an outlap, so we're going to check out another racer, Vornax, as well on his outlap, just about done. Along with ID78, who is just behind B Racing number 1. We're going to go check him out. RTR Mad Max, on just about finishing up one of his flying laps, currently in P8. Let's see if this lap puts him up any higher on the leaderboard at the moment. Yes, it does, and he did get a personal best for himself. P8 to P7 now for one of the Citroën drivers. B Racing number 1, and the Viper still in P8. Just behind him in the NSX, still in P9, a Largo K. As you can see, Pearland 117 going into the pits up there. Mikios are flashing his lights in the pits, showing off a little bit. RTR Adrian Senna, one of his flying laps. We're going to check him out for now. Down he goes at 800 meters straight. As you can start to see that elevation drop very prominent right here. And away he goes, a minute and 20 seconds in to his flying lap time. Just about a minute and 20, more or less. Well, I believe RTR Adrian Senna usually likes racing with a wheel, but right now he's currently been racing with a controller, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully he gets back to a wheel as soon as possible, back to his natural environment. And that was not going to be a flying lap for him, actually. He's just going to go right back into the pits. Let's check out RTR Tyke, like we said. Back to him we go. He's slipping, sliding away there just before this long straight. Putting down personal best sectors for him right now. Up the climb he goes again in the Lamborghini, still in P3 right now. Still putting down personal best lap times, sectors better yet. His fastest was back on his third lap. 153.63 right now, earning him P3. Though Vornax is not exactly far behind him with a 53.67. Not much of a difference there at all. Let's see if this lap puts him up just a little bit higher or separates him a little bit more from Vornax. Let's find out. 152.91. That certainly will separate him a lot more from Vornax's current 153.67. It's going to be about 7/10 of a second, I think, of a difference between himself and RTR Tyke. It's about a whole second and a half behind a man to beat RTR Adrian Senna right now. Let's check out RTR ID 78 at the moment in P6 in the midfield there with a 153.84 so far. It's his fastest lap time. He's about a minute and 45 seconds into his lap, which means that he is just about almost done. Let's watch him go past the finish line. And what does he get now? A 154.70. Just about a whole second slower than his fastest. So let's see if he can improve on that. With just about 4 minutes left in this qualifying race session, he goes into the grass there, making sure he gets out of the way there, I think, for Lucas Mas 22. So he's about 20 seconds into his flying lap. Let's stick with him for just a moment. Coincidence to see there, folks. Even though it is a fictional track, it's an Italian track, Lago Maggiori, and you have the Ferraris at the front, and right behind them in P3 and P4 you have the Lamborghinis. How about that for an Italian lockout here on this esports championship race? Pretty cool to see. Citroen's right behind him as well. P5, P6, and P7. That'd be Vornax. Right now is out qualifying some of the racers that were already originally part of this top league. Vornax, a Pro-Am racer, as well as ID 78 and Mad Max. But right now he is proving to be top of the class of here, as he is P5 and above the other two. RTR ID 78 in P6 right now, still with a 153.84, his best lap time. Mad Max, who I think last race qualified in around P3 or P4. Let's check out the stats really quick. Yeah, Mad Max qualified last time at Suzuka in P3, and right now he's getting out qualified by his fellow Citroen drivers, and he's going to be in P7 at the moment as it stands. Just about a minute over the minute left in this qualifying race session. I don't think he has too much time left to improve on that, although right now he is putting down personal bests. Round he goes, slingshotting around that sweet hairpin. Beginning the climb once again. ID 78, I think that's him right behind him. The man he's trying to get ahead of, who is one position ahead of him. I'm sure RTR Mad Max would want to be in P5 at the top of the Citroens, above Vornax and ID 78. But he may not have his way today. This may not be his track, or simply he just needs a little bit more work on it. It happens to some racers. Not saying that he is not a good driver. He is a fantastic driver, of course. the other day, actually. I had a private race with him, one of the Tokyo Expressway tracks. That was pretty fun. He certainly slapped me around the track, but it was a good time. B Racing number 1 getting to finish his final lap here. Let's see if it puts him up any higher than P8 at the moment. Largo K and the NSX going into the pits. I think he's going to be done for the day. RTR Mad Max also going out for one more flying lap. Those ID 78, Lucas Mass 22. Vornax putting down personal best. Although it seems that he is slowing down, that is certainly not a flying lap pace. Bumped him up to P4 now, separating the Lamborghinis of Lucas Mass 22 and RTR Tyke. So not a complete Italian lockout now, thanks to Vornax and a Citroen, although it still is a P1 and P2 for the Ferrari drivers of RTR Adrian Senna and RTR Perlin 117. Right now, folks, pretty much just waiting for the timer to go down, and B Racing number 1 putting down his last fastest lap time, putting him up to P6 at the final moment. Pretty cool for B Racing number 1, giving no opportunity for the other racers to get past him there now. And the man to beat, like we said, is going to be RTR Adrian Senna at the moment. RTR Perlin 117 right behind him in P3. RTR Tyke in the Lamborghini. B Racing number 1 bumping up to P6 from P8 at the last second, moving the Citroens a little bit farther down the pack in this 9-man race. Listen to the engines as they are patiently waiting for those lights. And the lights go. Great start there for RTR Type, like he usually does, already challenging RTR Adrian Senna for the inside, and he does get it on the first lap there. Although Adrian Senna quickly gets it back, moving on the outside. The Ferraris and the Lamborghinis already going at it there. RTR Tyke separating the Ferraris there. He's now in P2. Perlin 117 under attack from the other Lamborghini. Lucas Mass 22, who just got passed there by the Citroen of Vornax as he was occupied there trying to make an attack there on Perlin 117 and paid the price for it. Lucas Mass 22 trying to make up for that mistake, already chasing down Vornax on the inside, trying to squeeze him out of the way. Not going to happen though. RTR ID 78. And next to the Citroens, they're chasing down Lucas Mass 22, who is occupied trying to get back that position like we said. RTR Mad Max getting chased down by B Racing number 1, who unfortunately already dropped down from P6 back to P8. It was a great final last lap in the qualifying race session. And the NSX of Largo K still in the back of the pack right now as they go down that quick 20-degree difference of a hairpin there. Getting chased already by the other Italian brands as he starts climbing back up there with his very own Ferrari. RTR Tyke just about 0.5 of a second behind RTR Adrian Senna. All the drivers cooling down and separating a little bit now. RTR Perlin 117 down to P3, chasing down the other Lamborghini. Vornax still in P4, the first of the Citroens. And here they are bunching up Yet again, just a little bit there with B Racing number 1, putting a move there on RTR ID78, trying to go on the outside of this hairpin of turn number 2. Is he going to get it done? Going off into the grass here a little bit. Now he's going to be in a good position. He's going to be on the inside. Although ID78 simply carried more speed, and off he goes into the next hairpin. Downhill they go, getting chased by the Viper, who's getting chased by his Citroen brother there of RTR, Mad Max, in the cool blue livery. Largo K spinning out, going downhill there, slowing down a bit. Can he get back up to speed quickly? Let's hope he does. We'll get back to him in just a moment. We just don't want to miss some of the action here. And it appears that he did leave the room. That is unfortunate for him, Largo K. Very unfortunate to see you go, sir. Hope you can join us next time. Back to the action here, though. In this hairpin, RTR Mad Max now at the back of the pack now. As Largo K left, he's now going to be in P8. RTR ID78 chasing down B Racing number 1. While we were watching, Largo K managed to get that move done finally on RTR ID78, although ID78 does not seem to want to give up that position very easily. Quickly going back up to line, watching Lucas Mass 22 chasing Vornax, 0.2 of a second between their rear and front bumpers as they go around to complete lap number 2. I think now going to be starting lap number 3. Yes, indeed. Vornax positioning that Citroen at the perfect spots there for turn 1 and turn 2, making sure he keeps Lucas Mass 22 behind him where he wants. He's going to be in that middleman position. Very good position, a very difficult position to want to defend because you're right outside of the podium, and that's where everybody wants to be. Of course, if they want to get up higher on the podium, nobody wants to be in P4 at the end of the day, especially not these drivers. Very, very competitive. Back down the line, we see some of these drivers have separated. RTR ID78 maybe giving way to RTR Mad Max. Who knows if that is part of their strategy? One way to find out. B Racing number 1 pulling away now in that Viper, away from the other Citroens in P6. A nice bubble of time in between him, about 1.5 seconds away from P7, 2 seconds away from Lucas Mass 22 in the Lamborghini, who is still relentlessly chasing down Vornax in that maroon Citroen. Perlin 117 still in P3. In the Ferrari, RTR Tyke keeping a good pace right behind RTR Adrian Senna. On lap 4 we are now. Currently sticking with the man in P5, Pro Racer number 22, Lucas Mass 22, was at the moment 0.6 of a second away from the man in P4, Vornax. Just sticking with him to see if he decides to mount any sort of an attack, or if he's going to do a similar strategy to what RTR Tyke is doing up the line there behind RTR Adrian Senna, who doesn't seem to want to take away that position at the moment, but I think he's very comfortable in P2, staying behind him, making sure he doesn't lose sight of his competition, but does not seem very desperate to make any sort of attack just yet, as there is well over an hour and 22 minutes left in this race. RTR Perlin 117, however, may have a different story behind him, as Vornax is closing up behind him, as well as Lucas Mas 22. Lucas Mas 22 closely behind Vornax yet again. Perlin 117 seems to be pulling away again, though. I may have spoken too soon as they go down that straight. So you can tell that Ferrari certainly has a lot of straight line speed on this track. Lucas Mas 22 peeking on the outside there. Maybe just trying to get some sort of a reaction from Vornax, trying to provoke a mistake. Vornax right now is a pretty calm driver as they go a little bit downhill there. A little bit of a wobble from Lucas Mas 22. That turn they just did is certainly a strange one. Because number one, it is going uphill, and then it's not exactly a perfect round turn. If you can take a look at the map, it's almost triangular in its design. That is certainly a tricky one. If we see any sort of an overtake there, I will personally be impressed. Lucas Mas 22 taking advantage of Vornax's draft as they go on a downhill. Peeking again on the outside a little bit, or maybe just sliding out there. And we switch the camera just in time. RTR Tyke right behind RTR Adrian Senna. Almost no time between these racers. Practically in the same position. Just how they are in the standings. Both in P1 with 57 points. Fighting it out on the track for it, as you can see. RTR Tyke maybe as well trying to solicit some kind of a reaction here from RTR Adrian Senna, trying to provoke some sort of a mistake. Just to see if he can create any sort of opportunity for himself early on in this race without him having to change his pace or put too much work on his tires or his fuel management. Be racing number one still in P6, just about a second and just about a second, almost 2 seconds now actually. After that straight in the Viper, he's going to be almost 2 seconds away now there from RTR Mad Max and RTR ID 78. None of these drivers, as far as I know, have gone into the pits. We have lost Largo K, unfortunately. 6 laps into this race here at Lago Maggiori. I pray I'm pronouncing that right. In my defense, it's not a it is a fictional track, so I can get away with it. RTR Tyke still chasing him down. Staying closely behind RTR Adrian Senna. Climbing uphill once again, Perlin 117. Not too far behind him. Lucas Mas 22. Now pulling away there from Perlin 117, who has finally gotten the overtake on Vornax, who's dropped down to P5. Unfortunately, I missed that overtake. I definitely want to see that battle. But it seems that the Lamborghinis are making a comeback here. Lucas Mas 22 scraping the ground almost with his front bumper there. As you can see, the race pace is usually a little bit slower than qualifying. Most of these races putting down 54s and 55s. There's a little bit of wobbles and spin outs. Usually you get around 56s or a little bit higher from that. RTR Tyke once again right behind RTR Agent Senna. Going wide on that turn. Possibly just trying to conserve his tires a little bit more than his competitor ahead of him. As RTR Tyke knows that if he puts enough pressure on RTR Agent Senna, just like Perlin 117 did to him a few races ago, where RTR Agent Senna simply just did not have the tire traction to defend anymore. If he can mimic that, then RTR Tyke might be able to produce some sort of an opportunity for him pretty early on in this race before the first pit stop, and that's going to be very crucial if he gets to pull that off. Perlin 117 in the background of that camera, you can see. Lucas Mas 22 closing in behind him ever so slightly, just about 3 seconds behind Perlin 117, the final podium position. Let's watch these drivers here in P1 and P2, see if anything goes on in this next lap, as RTR Adrian Senna is trying to defend, making sure he keeps that vehicle as wide as possible, as he knows that any slight mistake that he does behind the wheel, and RTR Tyke is going to be there to pick up the spoils. Now on lap 8, folks. An hour and 15 minutes remaining. RTR Tyke still in P2, just slightly behind his competition RTR Adrian Senna in the Ferrari. Perlin 117 closing in behind the top two contenders now, as tire wear will now begin to factor in 8 laps into this race. I think the tire setting that we have for this league is going to be ×4, the multiplier for tire wear, and it may be just a little bit less, maybe ×3 for fuel if I'm correct. Lucas Mas 22 earlier got the overtake on the Citroen there of Vornax, moving himself up to P4, of course bumping down Vornax to P5. B Racing number 1 in the Viper, the only Viper on the track, still holding on to P6, which he earned last second in that qualifying race session. That was a pretty cool moment to see. That's definitely something that's going to be going on the first highlight video that comes out. RTR Mad Max and RTR ID78 seem to be comfortable in the back of the pack there in P7 and P8. They may be just changing this opportunity into their strategy, maybe trying to create an opportunity for them later on in the race. Being in the back of the pack here, as most of these races are all closely behind each other, isn't exactly a bad thing if you know what you're doing in terms of pit strategy. And racers like RTR Mad Max and RTR ID78, and pretty much everyone here, are certainly racers that know what they're doing when it comes to the battle of the pit strategy, the pit wars, as we like to call it. RTR Tyke now trying to get a little bit more of a reaction here. We notice from RTR Adrian Senna pushing him a little bit more than he did during the other laps. RTR Pearlin 117 maybe trying to defend his partner, or simply trying to confuse RTR Tyke, also flashing his headlights as he is closing in behind these two. Maybe trying to solicit a reaction of his own, see if he can get a bit of the action there. The back of the pack still seems to be pretty spaced out there, as RTR ID 78, as we put the camera on him, spinning out there on that hairpin, sliding very, very much. I don't think he's too happy maybe with his tire selection, but we'll see how much longer he hangs on to that before he goes into the pits. We'll see how that story develops as we're back up here in P4 watching Lucas Mas 22 and the Lamborghini. Just 2.5 seconds away from P3, the last position of the podium there, as he's backed off there from the top two racers, RTR Tyke and RTR Adrian Senna, who's still closely behind him. Going on the outside there of RTR Adrian Senna, but still hanging out just behind him as they enter the next turn. RTR Adrian Senna was a great job of defending all of these laps. Definitely is not easy to maintain a good race line and a good pace, trying to defend pretty much the whole time during all of these laps. And you can certainly say the same thing for RTR Tyke, who's been maintaining that pace and chasing him. Whoa! As he gets a little bit out of shape there. Unfortunately bumps RTR Adrian Senna, and I think rightfully gave him that position back. But the truce was quickly over, and I think they are back to battling it out again there. But that's what we like to see here at Ready to Race. Great sportsmanship from the drivers. RTR Tyke knew he made that mistake a little bit, just unfortunately lost a little bit of control there. Thankfully it didn't end up being a bigger crash. That would have been a disaster for both of those racers. And just like I called it there, folks, RTR ID 78 seems to be the first man into the pits there. Probably not very happy with his tire selection or his tire wear. RTR Tyke seems to now be mounting an attack there. Maybe after he shook the nerves of both himself and RTR Adrian Senna. Down the hill they go into that hairpin slingshot turn. Using a little bit of the curve there, both of them exiting that turn. Excellent race line from both of these drivers. Pearlin 117 managing to stay in that 2.5 second gap between himself and RTR Tyke. Probably hoping that if one of these guys goes into the pits, he'll have a chance to either follow in there or go on ahead and get some positions, or maybe even the lead. As both P1 and P2 drivers, like I said, just go into the pits. Pearlin 117 saw them going with more than enough time. Lucas Mas 22 also following in the leaders, as well as Vornax. And the other man joining the pit war, yes, he is B Racing number 1, Adrian Senna, RTR Adrian Senna, right back out there again. RTR Tyke not losing positions either, as well as RTR Pearlin 117. Lucas Mas 22 in P4 still, now closely behind the Ferrari of Pearlin 117. Let's see if any action happens there. B Racing number 1 gaining again to get another position over Vornax, who's now in P5. Vornax down to P6. RTR Mad Max, I think, is the only driver. Nope, never mind. He went into the pits as well in P7. And P8 is still going to be RTR ID 78. Let's check out Lucas Mats 22, who seems to have the shortest gap between most of these drivers. He's just about 0.5 of a second behind the podium position. Now he can smell it. P3 of Paralin 117. Let's see if he goes for another move here, just like he did on Vornax earlier on in the race. Just over an hour left, 12 laps in now. Maybe about a 36-40 lap race. One way to find out, of course, Lucas Mats 22. A little bit farther away now from Paralin 117. Maybe taking it easy now. Knowing that most of these drivers, if not all of these drivers, not exactly sure, but seems that most of the drivers have now switched to the faster compound. So a lot of these drivers are going to be even more mindful now of their tire management. Most of these drivers appear to be going for a faster stint, trying to pick up the pace there. RTR Adrian Senna certainly doing his best to pull away now. 4 seconds away from RTR Tyke. No chance of a draft at the moment for RTR Tyke. So that's going to be another added advantage from RTR Adrian Senna. He is bringing nobody along with him as he starts running away from the rest of the pack. And that's going to be also giving him a chance to set up an even greater pace against the rest of the racers who are trying to take away that P1 position from him at the moment. Still have a chance to do it with just over an hour left in this race. But RTR Adrian Senna is going to do his best to keep up a pace that nobody else can match. So that way, he gets the best decision when it comes to going into the pits the next time around. RTR Tyke now about 4.5 seconds away there. Paralin 117 in P3. In a pretty comfortable bubble as well, 3 seconds away from the podium position, up ahead of him. About 2.5 seconds away from his close competition there of Lucas Mats 22. The second there of the Lamborghinis, B Racing number 1. The one and only of the Vipers, representing American muscle, if you will. Putting down purple sectors. Very impressive for this driver, as he is currently in P5. Vornax right now in P6. Just ahead of his Citroen brothers of RTR Mad Max and RTR ID 78s. As most of these drivers now appear to be comfortably away from each other. B Racing number 1 putting down a personal best lap time for him. Probably one of the best performances I've seen from B Racing number 1 during this whole season, that is for sure. RTR Tyke, as you can see, going wide on some of his turns again. Just like we said, that may be something that he's factoring into when it comes to tire management. RTR Tyke is usually a pretty aggressive driver, but over the races that I've seen, he's certainly morphed into more of a technical driver. Seen a lot more strategy when it comes to this racer now. Paralin 117 still in P3, closing that gap ever so slightly from RTR Tyke there. Lucas Mats 22 might be able to say the same for him, as now you can see that Ferrari way ahead there, but just in the background of the camera. Lucas Mass 22 is on to lap number 15, as well as B Racing number 1. Vornax and the other two Citroens closely behind the rest of the pack. RTR Adrian Senna still pulling away from his closest competitor, Tyke. About 5 seconds away from him now. RTR Tyke may come under attack there from Parallel 117 in the near future, as it seems that RTR Parallel 117 is closing that gap in, lap by lap. And by the way, although he is in P3, he currently has the fastest lap time of the race session with a 151.98. So a quick shout out to him there. If he manages to hold on to that fastest lap status by the time the race is done, he will be awarded an extra point onto his season point status. So that'll be an extra point added for him if he manages to hold on to it. Which will certainly be crucial for a driver like him. Right now is tied with his Ferrari partner for P1 with 57 points. RTR Tyke in P2 still at the moment. His fastest lap time personally for him right now during the race session is going to be a 152.85. Also very much up there with the elites. Parallel 117 managed to close that gap down to about a second now. Lucas Mass 22 about 5.5 seconds away from any podium position at the moment. B Racing number 1, just about the same amount of time between those two races, P4 and P5. RTR Tyke pulling away a little bit there now. Slide there from RTR Tyke. He may be a little bit worried now, knowing that he has Parallel 117 creeping up on him. And for some reason, Parallel 117 appears to have gotten a small little penalty, which I'm sure he's going to do his best to try and burn out as the rules go as soon as possible, and there it goes. That is going to be a little bit of a wrench in Parallel 117's strategy, as that's going to open up that gap once again between RTR Tyke and himself. So Parallel 117 probably not too happy about that. I'm sure we all know the Grand Juno penalty system isn't always exactly the best. Let's just keep it at that. Lucas Mass 22, the second of the Lamborghinis, completing another lap. Off he goes into lap number 17. His best lap time so far in this race session is a 153.01. Pretty good pace as well, especially for him here in P4. B Racing number 1. Look at the Viper go. Just about 6 or so seconds away from Lucas Mass 22 in that Lamborghini. The Citroens still seem to be holding off a little bit there, maybe looking for an opportunity later on once again in the race. Wonder what they're up to. Lucas Mass 22 approaching a very, very fast downhill at 800 meter on straight. Parallel 117 just ahead of him, watching him now. gap that he had earlier on. It's almost doubled now, unfortunately for him, after that penalty that he had to serve. Most of these drivers now are pretty spaced out, pretty comfortable where they are. Pretty happy with the race pace, as you can see. Most of these drivers are not exactly changing it up too much lap by lap. Maybe going a little bit wide or a little bit tight on some turns. Just ever so slightly changing their race line. Depending on how far ahead, how far behind or how far ahead they are from the positions behind and ahead of them respectively. So I think what we're going to be waiting for in terms of action, maybe when we see them shuffle up again in the pits. That's what seems to stir the pot up there a little bit. But most of these drivers at the moment, like I said, seem to be pretty comfortable in terms of spacing and their pace. The only challenge I really see that's being mounted is from RTR Parallel 117, who, like we said, unfortunately got denied there from the Gran Turismo penalty system. That opened up the gap between P2 and P3 of those drivers once again. Lucas Mas 22 still in P4, like we said, doing a pretty good job in terms of tire management. Cruising around the track pretty comfortably there. Not too much of an issue from this Lamborghini driver. B Racing number 1 also seems to be very comfortable on this track. So definitely going to be good for him, as he's pretty low in the points at the moment. We can pull up the points sheet just to give you an exact number once again. See how much of a benefit it's going to be for this driver. B Racing number 1 right now is in P9. Yeah, so right now he's going to be tied with MTX 069, the Pro-Am driver. They're both in P9 with 22 points. But as it stands right now, if B Racing number 1 manages to clinch on to P5, that would be giving him an extra 17 points by the end of the race, putting him up there with 39 points. So that would get him pretty high up there, probably moving there from P9 more to the midfield in terms of points, as we watch B Racing go into the pits. One of the first drivers, I think, the second stint to go into the pits. Although he does not seem to be refueling or going out, so nope, off he goes there, folks. Never mind. May have just glitched on my screen. Had me a little bit worried there. I was hoping he didn't have to log off. Thankfully he's back out there. Dropped down to P7 though. Although may not be something to worry about too much, as now these drivers are going into the pits. RTR ID 78, I believe, is going to be the second one out of this stint to go into the pits. B Racing number 1 may be looking to get a good undercut on these drivers. So that's going to be pretty cool to see. Like we said, we always enjoy watching the pit wars, the strategy that these drivers decide to put down, especially those that are in the midfield, that are trying to do their best to gain as many positions as this race unfolds and goes along. RTR ID 78 gaining no positions after that one, as he was already in P8 to begin with. B Racing number 1 just going to be about a few tenths away there from RTR Mad Max in P6. Although I don't think B Racing number 1 is going to do too much of an effort to chase him down, as he knows that most of these drivers are going to be going into the pits very shortly. RTR Tyke going into the pits as well now, with the fuel and tire change. Lucas Mas 22, his fellow Lamborghini partner, also joining him in the pit lane. RTR Tyke out he goes, losing 1 position to Parallel 117, dropping down to P3 for the moment. Lucas Mas 22 coming out in P4, holding on to his position, I believe. RTR Mad Max in the pits as well, and Vornax exiting now in P5, just ahead of B Racing number 1, who's just beginning his lap. Number 20, RTR Mad Max, coming out of the pits as well. Coming back out there in P7, 34 seconds ahead of his Citroen partner of RTR ID 78. Re-racing number 1 back in P6, just about 3-4 seconds away from Vornax, the top of the Citroens in terms of position right now. In P5, Lucas Mas 22, the first of the Lamborghinis. From the bottom up, RTR Tyke, the second one there of the Lamborghinis in P3, and the Ferraris once again with a 1-2, RTR Adrian Senna in P1, and Perlin 117 in second place, just behind him. Still holding on to the fastest lap, by the way. Although I believe Perlin 117 has not yet gone into the pits, and I think we can say the same thing for RTR Adrian Senna, who's about 4 seconds ahead of his fellow Ferrari racer. Although I'm sure he won't mind if another Ferrari takes the P1 position, I'm sure he'd be much happier if it was him that's at the top of the leaderboard. As both of the Ferraris decide to go into the pits, Perlin 117 just behind RTR Adrian Senna as well. It's just going to be a battle of the pits now as RTR Tyke takes the lead. Or does he? As they come out to see their final positions, RTR Tyke is going to be back in P2 actually. RTR Adrian Senna just behind him, just ahead of him now. And Perlin 117 as well. Just a few seconds behind the action that is probably going to unfold in front of him in just a few moments. Let's stick with these drivers as RTR Tyke is just going to be less than half a second away once again from his competition of RTR Adrian Senna. Let's see if anything happens in the turns to come. RTR Tyke though seems to be cooling down just a little bit there in terms of pace, opening up that gap just ever so slightly. Probably once again looking at the long run, as I don't think this is going to be the last pit of this race so far. Just about to pass the 50-minute mark. That's 50 minutes remaining in this race. We're about 40 minutes into this race now. These races are set up for an hour and a half each. And right now we're on lap 21, Perlin 117. The last of the podium positions there. Just about 5 seconds away now. Pretty much the same gap between P3 and P4. Who's going to be comfortably in P4 for the moment at least. As Vornax and the Citroen is going to be just around 10 seconds away from them. B Racing number 1 holding on to P6 still. We may have to worry about RTR Mad Max at least, as he does seem to be closely closing that gap between P6 and P7. He's about 4 seconds away from him now. RTR ID 78 still in the back of the pack there in P8. It certainly does seem like RTR Tyke has backed off, definitely keeping in mind his tires on this stint, opening up that gap to about 2 seconds now. So these drivers are definitely going to be looking for the long run once again, not exactly looking to mount any sort of attacks on the drivers ahead of them. Perlin 117 once again still holding on to a pretty good pace there. Down the hill he goes, not too far away there from P1 and P2. Lucas Mas 22, the last of the Lamborghinis there, going down that same turn. Sticking with Vornax for just a moment here. we are now on lap 23. Still watching Vornax here, one of the Pro-Am drivers, Pro-Am A drivers, better yet, in P5. Moving back up to line, still watching Lucas Mass 22 there in P4. Parallel 117, P3 still. RTR Tyke in P2, and watching the man to beat now, RTR Adrian Senna. The personal best lap time of 152.01. Not too far away there from Parallel 117, fastest lap time of a 151.98. Might be able to clinch that extra point, which will be crucial for them in terms of the points battle. As he switched the camera over there to Vornax, he's putting down personal best lap times yet again for himself. Like we said, this is usually a driver to look out for. That always does a pretty good job of improving himself as the race goes on. Pretty cool to see that adaptation in every track we've put this guy out on so far. Definitely start to see exactly why we bumped him up to league number 1 here of RTR Ready to Race. As he goes on to lap 24, putting down yet again another personal best lap time for himself, 153.05 for Vornax now. 45 minutes left in this race. Halfway through this race session, if I am not mistaken. Back to B Racing number 1 in P6, who was earlier in P5. That has been his best position in this race so far. May still have a chance to regain it or even higher, as there's probably going to be maybe 1 or 2 pits still to see in this race session. So that's going to be 2 more opportunities for people in the midfield and the back of the pack to maybe promote themselves up the line there by using the pit strategy rather than trying to catch up and burning out their tires too quickly. If they try to catch up on pure race pace alone, would not exactly be a good strategy against these drivers. Max climbing up the hill there. His personal best lap time still is going to be 153.93 for him. RTR ID 78 still about 30 seconds away from his Citroen partner. Still in the back of the pack there in P8. Strange to see for both of these drivers, as usually you tend to see them a little bit more in the midfield. Although seeing as some drivers are missing today, we do seem to be getting the purest form of the competition. Most of our top racers here today. So even though it's usually a little bit of a bigger lobby, that's what we're used to now. I think we're still getting a pretty good show of a race here with how good these guys are out on the track. As we stick with RTR Tyke, watching him finish lap number 25 of this race session. Tyke getting a little bit out of shape during that last turn, getting a little bit too much of the grass. And as most of these these drivers are now a few laps into this stint on these tires. Once again, tire management is going to be something that's going to start coming into play now. With the wicked fast pace that most of these drivers seem to be holding up right now, may start seeing some sliding around the track there, especially with the tire compound that most of these drivers, or all of these drivers, may appear to have gone with. Lucas Mass 22 still in P4 there. 20 seconds into lap 26. Parallel 117 still holding on to P3 comfortably. No competition right now behind him in terms of distance. Lucas Mass 22 still a little bit too far away to be any sort of a threat at the moment. But that can certainly change as the race is definitely not done just yet. And we are probably approaching another pit window pretty soon. You know, it feels like these drivers have pretty much just gone into the pits, but believe me, these tires do wear out very, very fast, especially when these drivers are trying to keep up such an intense pace. Guys like RTR, Adrian Senna, Tyke, and Parallel 117 definitely being factors in that at the moment. Because when they keep this kind of thing up, that also forces racers just behind them, kind of forces them to keep up an even faster pace than maybe they want to do, or something that they're not used to, right? So that's also another factor that can play into races like this, especially when you're at the front of the pack. Vornax still in P5. It appears that B Racing number 1 slowly losing that chance of getting an overtake, at least on the track, on Vornax. It's now falling into the grips there of RTR Mad Max, who's just about a second ahead of behind him. So we're going to stick with these two drivers, see if there's any action that may be producing itself in just a moment as we watch RTR ID 78 going into the pits once again. RTR Mad Max closing in behind B Racing number 1. Definitely in a full-on mode of chase as they're going downhill into that hairpin. Very late braking from both of those drivers. And RTR Mad Max not letting up as they start climbing up the hill once again. Chasing down that American Viper. Lucas Mass 22, we can also see him going into the pits from P4 as these drivers are soon to complete their lap. Vornax as well going into the pits. Let's see who wins that pit battle. Seems that Lucas Mass 22 is going to be the first one to drive out. B Racing number 1 giving away the position to Mad Max, but going into the pits there. May have just pulled a very good bluff there for Mad Max, as he has now just made him wear out his tires as he was trying to chase B Racing number 1 during that lap. So Mad Max may feel a little bit tricked at the moment. And after that quick shuffle of the pits, that's Lucas Mass 22 still in P4. Vornax in P5 still. RTR Mad Max moving himself up to P6 after chasing down B Racing number 1, who at the last second decided to go into the pits there for tires and fuel, back down to P7, although we are still waiting for the races at the front of the pack to go into the pits once again. Guys like RTR Agent Senna, RTR Tyke, and Perlin 117, if I am not mistaken, have not yet gone into the pits for their next pit stop. Watching RTR Adrian Senna, he's approaching the pit line once again, not going into the pits on this particular lap, starting lap 29 now. RTR Tyke may be looking for an undercut here as he is in P2 going into the pits, as well as RTR Perlin 117. That is one thing I always notice and I do like to see from the Ferrari drivers, is usually in around the last half hour of the race, we don't really tend to see that brotherhood anymore between Ferrari drivers. That's one thing I always like to see. That friendship pretty much goes out the window after the last 30 minutes. So it's just Ferrari versus Ferrari. And I think Perlin 117 likes the idea of how RTR Tyke is thinking with that undercut method, maybe looking to put some kind of a trick there on the man to beat right now, RTR Agent Senna, as RTR Mad Max also goes into the pits. B Racing number 1 may be taking advantage of that, reclaiming P6. Is it gonna happen? Mad Max is still stationary there in the pits, seems to be getting more fuel there into his car. Off he goes now. B Racing number 1 well off into turns number 3 and 4 now. He's gonna be in P6 for sure, at least for this lap. Just about 10 seconds away there once again there from RTR Mad Max. 10 seconds away from P5 as well. Vornax, the top of the Citroen still. Lucas Mass 22 back in P4. Perlin 117 still in P3, and RTR Tyke 2 seconds away of that Ferrari, 20 seconds away from the other Ferrari. And we may be expecting a pit from RTR Adrian Senna this time. Are we going to see it? Yes, sir, we are. Off he goes into the pits. 20 seconds ahead of RTR Tyke. Let's stick to RTR Tyke, see if he can catch up to him before this man leaves. RTR Agent Senna refueling already. RTR Tyke just about to finish that lap. Is he going to be able to pass him? RTR Tyke Adrian Senna already leaving the pits now. Still holding on to P1. But now only 5 seconds away, 7 seconds away, better yet, from RTR Tyke now. Perlin 117 also knows that he's in close contention to get some kind of an opportunity out of here, although he is already on the podium. But I'm sure he wants to go higher up there, as he is still battling it out there on the point stats. If he gets P3, I'm pretty sure that would drop him down to about P3 now on the stat sheet, giving an opportunity for RTR Tyke to maybe even be at the top of the championship or in P2 behind Adrian Senna as it stands right now. RTR Tyke still maintaining a pretty good pace on those new tires there, taking up a bit of that grass there, doing a bit of lawn mowing. Perlin 117 just about a second behind RTR Tyke, trying to confuse him there, flashing his headlights as they go downhill. Usual method you see even in real racing, of course. This gives a chance to solicit some sort of a reaction or maybe a mistake from the drivers ahead of him. Bit of a dirty tactic, depends on how you look at it, but in my personal opinion, I think it's pretty fair. Not exactly like you're trying to blind the driver permanently or spin him out or anything like that. That's not what we want to see, of course. And the drivers in the midfield seems to have a pretty comfortable bubble in between each other in terms of time gaps. May not be seeing some action in the midfield, at least for the next few laps. Pearland 117 closing in behind RTR Tyke still. Maybe wanting to mount an attack on this stint, or may just want to keep him as close as possible, as there is just over 30 minutes left in this race. RTR Tyke still managing to hold on to P2 of that podium. 31 laps into this race now. RTR Tyke and Pearland 117 are playing the game of race pace. Adrian Senna is taking advantage that they're not very fully focused on him maybe. He's about 8.5 seconds ahead of that action. Still in a very, very comfortable lead ahead of these racers for now. At the back of the pack, still about 30 seconds away from his racing partner Mad Max is going to be ID 78 there. B Racing number 1 back in P6 in that Viper once again, and Vornax still in P5. P1, 2, 3, and 4 has not changed for just about the last hour or so, more or less. Just a few shuffles in between that time when the drivers went into the pits. More or less the same exact order that we've been seeing throughout this race session. Doing a pretty good job there of keeping that second gap between himself and RTR Tyke. Something I'm sure he's going to be working very hard to maintain right now. In the crucial last half hour of this session. Not exactly worried about Lucas Mass 22. Just over 10 seconds away from him now. Pretty much say the same thing for Lucas Mass 22 and his competition behind him of Vornax, the top of the Citroen drivers of this race day so far. B Racing number 1, like we said, still in P6, where he started after that last steal that he did on his final flying lap in the final seconds of that qualifying race session. Very cool move to see from B Racing number 1, one of the oldest drivers on our roster. RTR Tyke, I'm sure, is constantly looking to the rearview mirrors now as he can see that red and black Ferrari of RTR Pearland 117 constantly as he goes around this track. Sure doing his best to not pay attention to those headlight flashes. Not something that he wants to be concerned about. Not something that he wants distracting him. Closing up the gap on this lap. either picking up the pace or maybe going actually for some sort of attack as he is chasing him down. RTR Tyke though does also appear to have slowed down ever so slightly in his race pace. Maybe just trying to protect those tires just a little bit longer, trying to last a little bit more than his competitors ahead and behind him. Still managing to put that car in the right position to keep Pearland 117 in P3. Pearland 117 looking into the inside there. RTR Tyke closing the door on him just the last second. Pearland 117 not going as wide as Tyke there. Doing some pretty tight turning at the moment. Trying to save a few milliseconds here and there. Sliding out of that turn. Pearland 117, I'm sure, is being as mindful as possible, knowing that he cannot attack too much if he wants to keep those tires in good shape for this stint. If I'm not mistaken, there may be just one more pit stop if I'm correct. So that's why I think these drivers are definitely trying to battle it out a little bit more as they know what is approaching. And after that last pit stop, I'm sure no driver wants to make the mistake of having to go in one last time. Pearland 117 definitely now putting the pressure on RTR Tyke as they go on that downhill. On that hairpin turn, climbing up the hill once again. Virtually no time in between these drivers here. Pearland 117 sitting closely behind that rear wing of the Lamborghini. Not planning for any attack at the moment. Might just be waiting for that very short straight where he tried to attack just earlier on in this lap. Looking in on the inside, and RTR Tyke managed to close the gap that time. Is he going to be able to do the same thing on this one? Let's find out, folks. So he decided not to do that same inside trick, staying behind RTR Tyke on this particular time. Very deep on the inside there on that turn. That did not gain him any advantage as he still is behind RTR Tyke there. Lucas Mas 22 first to pit out of this round, dropping down to P5 from P4. Back out into the pits he goes, I believe, just behind Vornax on this throw-in. Back to Pearland 117, who's still chasing down RTR Tyke relentlessly here. Five tenths of a second away from P2 now. RTR Tyke appears to still be staying pretty cool there. So he goes on the inside there now, probably trying to break the draft a little bit there from Pearland 117. Haven't seen that obvious of a move in a while there. Pearland 117 flashing his headlights to his competitor just ahead of him. Desperately trying to solicit some sort of a mistake, some sort of a reaction from the driver ahead of him. To which RTR Tyke does not respond to any sort of that distraction. He's done a pretty good job of maintaining a cool head. As you can see, his display on the track right now, doing a pretty good job of keeping that car wide, keeping that pace up that he wants to keep to make sure he doesn't fall back too far from RTR Adrian Senna, who's now 10 seconds away from these two drivers that we're watching right now. And no other driver, I believe, has gone into the pits aside from Lucas Mas 22, which cost him one position at the moment, but like we said, that may be maybe too early of an undercut possibly, but he might just be trying something out there now with 22 minutes left in this race session. Vornax in heat goes into the pits as well now. We're going to stick with Pearland and RTR Tyke as we may still see some sort of an overtake happen. Vornak still in the pits, probably coming out very, very shortly. B Racing number 1, third from this round of pit stops to go in. Maryland 117 now about a second away from RTR Tyke, maybe deciding to back off now and just look at after his tires, knowing that there's about 20 minutes left in this race session and most of these drivers will still go into the pits one more time. With the exception of the drivers that have already gone in there just now, such as Lucas Mas 22 is now back up to P5, by the way. Vornak still in P5 as well. Sorry, Lucas Mas 22 is now in P4 once again. Vornak's back to P5, B Racing back to his qualifying position in P6. Mad Max still in the back in P7, and RTR ID 78. As we put the cursor over his name, he goes into the pits. Back up to Pearland 117 and RTR Tyke, who's still getting chased by that Ferrari just behind him. As they go around the track to complete one more lap in just a moment. RTR ID 78 coming out of the pits now. Tyke going into the pits, and Pearland 117 almost going in right behind him when he decides to stay out for one last lap. RTR Tyke refueling now as we're watching him. Pearland 117 trying to create as much of a gap from Tyke as possible, has now come back out in P3. Pearland 117 now about 12 seconds away from Tyke, who's 12 seconds away from RTR H and Senna as well. The midfield has now gone into the pits. We're just waiting for some of the leaders here to go into the pits now. And I believe that may be the final pit stop that we see in this race session, with just about 20 minutes left to go. 37 laps into this race. Almost an identical gap between P1 and P2 and P3. Pearland 117 going downhill again with that hairpin turn. I'm sure here's where you see that 40-meter change in elevation. Very drastic change. Reminds me of the turn in Spa, another track that we're going to be racing on for you later on in the season. Can't wait for that race. Pearland 117 about to finish his lap. Let's watch RTR H and Senna go into what may be his final pit stop as well. Pearland 117 going downhill and going for one more lap. Going for the win here, going for the risk as RTR H and Senna beats him out of the pits and still holds on to P1, 2 seconds away from Pearland 117, who definitely will not have the same tire traction as RTR H and Senna, who has just come out on brand new tires. So I don't think we're going to see any kind of attack there from RTR Pearland 117. Although now I fear that Pearland 117 may have pitted, or may be going into the pits a little bit too late now. Although he still does have quite a large gap away from RTR Tyke. Which is about 10 seconds away now. RTR Mad Max going into the pits as well. You can see in P7. May still come out in P7, as RTR ID 78 is about 40 seconds away from Mad Max. And you can see RTR H and Senna already pulling away there from Pearland 117. That gap is almost up to about 5 seconds now. stick here with RTR Parallel 117. Let's see if he goes into the pits on this particular lap. I think that's when we're going to see it. Yes, we will, and he goes. And now let's watch RTR Tyke, see if he can take advantage of the fact that Parallel 117 is currently in the pits, and I think he will take full advantage of that. That might be securing P2 for him, as Parallel 117 is still stationary in there, and RTR Tyke is already approaching turns 1 and 2. And he is certainly gone for the moment. Parallel 117 just exiting the pits now. What's probably going to be his final outlap. Might have been a risky move, but this might mean that he has a little bit more tire traction in those final crucial important minutes of this race. Just over 15 minutes left to go. RTR Adrian Senna is still 14 seconds comfortably ahead of RTR Tyke now. 5 seconds away from RTR Parallel 117, who's the last of this whole lineup to go into the pits. Very risky maneuver, but like we said, he might just be going for the advantage of tire traction in the last minutes of this race. Let's see if that plays into his favor as we approach the finish line. Lucas Mas 22, the last of the Lamborghini, still in P4. Vornax doing a very impressive job. Out of the Citroens, staying into P5. B Racing number 1 still holding on to P6 there. And RTR Mad Max and ID78 seems to be hanging out in P7 and P8 for the remainder of this race. Maybe not exactly the best performance, but they may not have the best setup, or simply they just might not be the track for them. Hopefully we see them perform a little bit better in races to come. But my prediction is that we're going to see those two Citroens possibly in the back of the pack for the rest of the race. Although we did see some life there from RTR Mad Max during the qualifying race session. He was doing a pretty good job in the first minutes. It was only at the end that he started trailing back. RTR Tyke going into the pits once again, destroying that gap that he had between RTR Parallel 117, and now gives him a little bit of a bumper kiss there. RTR Tyke might be going for one final trick move there in his book of strategy. And brand new race tires for the last 14 minutes left of this race. Maybe trying to steal that advantage away from Parallel 117, although he was now right behind him. Parallel 117 is looking for a move now. I'm sure he's going to try and attempt it at this moment. But he has to be mindful as there are 14 minutes left, and every minute counts, as your tires do start to wear out on every single turn that they take over here. RTR Adrian Senna taking advantage once again of the fact that these two drivers are battling it out behind him. He's about 20 seconds away from all of this, completely oblivious of what's going on behind him, I'm sure. RTR Tyke doing his best job as usual to make this vehicle as wide as possible. And I will tell you, with just about 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes left in this race, I still do not have a definite answer on who Bumblebee's driver of the day is going to be. I've seen very, very impressive driving from several of these racers. B Racing number 1 is certainly going to be a contender, as we're watching him right now. With that quick steal that he did in the qualifying lap session that he did in the final seconds of that race session, he managed to clinch P6. Bumping himself up to P5 was his highest position so far, with just still 12 minutes left in this race. Vornax as well, another driver that has impressed. Sorry, as we go back up to Parallel 117, who is dangerously behind RTR Tyke making sure we don't miss any of the action. But still speaking about Vornax, who's currently in P5 in that maroon Citroen, performing the best out of the 3 Citroens, which is very impressive to see a driver that came from the secondary league coming into the Pro and Pro-Am league, and certainly impressing, being pretty much at the top of the midfield almost. Battling it out with guys like Beer Racing number 1 today, Lucas Mats 22 as well. Pearland 117 getting a little bit out of shape there on this particular lap. It's going to be opening up that gap again between Pearland 117 and RTR Tyke. Almost 7/10 of a second in between them now. And I think the last contenders for me for that Bumblebee driver of the day would also be the drivers we've been watching currently. RTR Pearland 117 and RTR Tyke. They've just done a stupendous job of shuffling between P2 and P3, maintaining a good pace against each other and against RTR Adrian Senna as well. So very impressive to see this long-term battle between these drivers, and the whole race it pretty much appears to have gone for. Definitely also enjoyed that final trick that RTR Tyke pulled out of his hat. Didn't exactly expect him to do that one, of going into the pits at the last second there for brand new racing softs, which is definitely an advantage and definitely changes up the whole game in the last crucial minutes of this race, as Vornax might also be going for a similar trick. May have miscalculated that fuel. He goes into the pits and comes back out in P5 only because B Racing number 1 has also decided to go into the pits. He's coming out once again in P6 there. A lot of these drivers pulling out some last minute tricks in this race. Maybe due to miscalculating, or maybe due to the fact that they're feeling pretty lucky today. A lot of risky moves in the last couple minutes of this race. Pearland 117 seems to have backed off, maybe trying to take care of his tires for just a little bit longer before he mounts another attack on RTR Tyke. He's about 1.5 seconds away from him now. 10 seconds away from all this action is going to be Lucas Mats 22 closing it up with the last of the Italian brand of the cars in the Lamborghini. Vornax still in P5, B Racing in P6 respectively, and the last of the Citroën still in P7 and P8. RTR Adrian Senna still about 20 seconds ahead of P2 there. 43 laps into this race, just over 9 minutes remaining. RTR Tyke still getting chased down there by Pearland 117 as Lucas Mats 22 also decides to go into the pits. Running out of fuel, maybe going for a miscalculation again, or purposely going for a last second pit stop, as he is quite comfortably ahead of Vornax. Right now the screen is telling me 25 seconds is going to be the gap between them, and I think it's going to stay that way, which is why Lucas Mats 22 was comfortable going into the pits like that. See, now we're getting the updated numbers, and now it's going to be cutting that down to 15 seconds between Lucas Mats 22 and Vornax, which is still pretty substantial, especially with only 8 minutes remaining in this race session. Pearland 117, however, though, that P3 podium position may not be something very possible now for Lucas Mats 22, as he's about 20 seconds away from Pearland 117 in P3, who has just gotten once again another penalty, and I'm sure he's going to be looking to burn that off once again. Yes, he does, costing him that race gap between RTR Tyke. But we do appreciate Pearland 117 as well as these other racers for their sportsmanlike qualities. That is certainly what we're looking for, as RTR Adrian Senna, who's comfortably 20 seconds ahead of P2, decides to go for one more tire change and a little splash of fuel, and off he goes. RTR Tyke just coming down the hill into that pit straight. Not going to be a threat right now for RTR Adrian Senna. Although that gap is probably going to cut down from 20. Yes, it did, down to around 13 seconds. And RTR Adrian Senna, I believe now, is going to be the man with the freshest tires on the track. Crucial, especially for him, as he is and has been in the lead of this race this whole time. Just over 6 minutes left in this race. RTR Adrian Senna, like we said, 13 seconds ahead of P2 and P3. Freshest tires on the track. All these drivers, I believe, now running on racing softs. RTR Tyke still in P2. Thanks to that penalty that Pearland 117 had to serve, that gap between them now is going to be 2.5 seconds. Lucas Mas 22, 20 seconds away from a podium position. Not looking very good for him if he's still looking to make any sort of promotions up the line. He might just have to be comfortable and content going home with P4 as it stands. P5 as it stands right now is going to be awarded to Vornax. 20 seconds away from P4, 10 seconds away ahead of B Racing number 1 and the American muscle of that Dodge Viper. The last of the Citroens still closing it out in P7 and P8. Still going to be a good amount of points for these racers, but I'm sure they're going to have some ground to cover in the next races to come if they want to get back up there on the point sheet. Finishing this race in P7 and P8 is going to be something a little bit costly for this team of the Citroens of RTR Mad Max and RTR ID 78. Back up to the front of the pack, 45 laps into this race, just over 5 minutes to go now. You see that red and black Ferrari of RTR Adrian Senna. Tyke now about a second and a half ahead of Pearland 117, who's been trying to close up that gap. Although that has obviously been costing him a little bit of tire wear. So these are the minutes, these are the moments where the tire wear is certainly going to be a factor of who can push the car just a little bit more than the person ahead of them. Pearland 117, though, at the moment is still going to be going home with that fastest lap time of a 151.98. So that's going to be an extra point for him as it stands right now. However, with Adrian Senna right now in P1, that might get him to pull away into P1. Break that tie between himself and Pearland 117. And RTR Tyke might be somewhere along the line there of P1 and P2 on his stat sheet after this race. Although, like we said, that fastest lap time point is always a deciding factor sometimes, especially with these top 3 drivers that have been very close in terms of points throughout the whole season so far. RTR Tyke probably looking into his rearview mirrors a little bit more often now. Less than a second between himself and RTR Pearland 117 now. To find out if any of these drivers can make something happen for themselves, create some sort of an opportunity. With just over 3 minutes and 30 seconds left to go, it seems that RTR ID 78 may also be a factor now, as RTR Adrian Senna takes away that extra lap point from Pearland 117. RTR Adrian Senna now has the fastest lap time of the session with a 151.90. Probably thanks to those brand new racing softs that he put on at the last minute, definitely giving him an advantage over the other racers behind him. Is ID 78 going to be causing a little bit of a traffic jam here as they go uphill into the next turn? Although ID 78 is usually pretty good at getting out of the way. And here come P2 and P3 placeholders, RTR Tyke and RTR Pearland 117. Probably going to see ID 78 in the camera in just a moment. There he is just ahead of him still. Slight slide there from RTR Tyke going into the grass here. Trying to pull away from Pearland 117 desperately in the last few minutes of this race. As you can see him sidewinding down that straight. get Pearland 117 to lose a little bit of control there as he looks into the inside. Was just a little bit too far away there to make anything happen. A lot of oversteer there for Pearland 117 exiting that turn. Still keeping just around 2-3 tenths of a second behind RTR Tyke. Closing in behind him still. RTR Tyke barely keeping that gap between himself and that Ferrari in P3. Headlights being flashed at him as they begin lap number 47 for these drivers. ID78 definitely may be a traffic issue in the turns to come, and ID78 gets out of the way. Very kind and sportsmanlike of him. Thank you very much to ID78. As these drivers continue to battle it out just ahead of him now. Although that still created a bit of an opportunity there for RTR Tyke, who's now 7 tenths of a second ahead of Pearland 117, who's already closing that gap down once again. And just a minute left in this race now. 17 seconds ahead of him is going to be RTR Adrian Senna, who, based off of his track position right now, he may actually force a second lap or one final lap, which may be crucial for some of these racers who are pretty much running on fumes now. Some of these racers definitely in the red in terms of fuel management. This is going to be a dangerous move for some of these racers. Some of these guys have pretty good track position right now. RTR Tyke making sure he holds on to the inside of that hairpin. Pearland 117 once again oversteers a little bit as he goes outside of that turn. RTR Adrian Senna, 20 seconds remaining in this race session, and he may actually force one final lap. RTR Tyke getting pushed to the outside there by Pearland 117, losing control there. RTR Tyke now dropping to P3. Pearland 117, I think, is going to be able to go home with P2, or is this going to be the final lap? I think it is going to be P2 for Pearland 117 as he's getting the checkered flag. P3 for RTR Tyke as well. And obviously P1 for RTR Adrian Senna taking the way home, first place. Lucas Mas 22, here he comes around the finish line to secure P4 for himself in that Lamborghini. It's going to be a 1, 2, 3, 4 lockout of Italian cars for Ferrari and Lamborghini from P1 to P4 respectively. First of the Citroens comes down the hill to finish his final lap. Vornax in the maroon Citroen in P5. That's what he's going to be going home with, spinning out in style. B Racing number 1. I think one of the oldest drivers on the track right now, and the American muscle of the Dodge Viper. Good to see him back with us, and good to see him in P6 as he goes past the finish line. RTR ID78, of course, going home with P8, and RTR Mad Max securing P7 for him as he goes past the finish line as well. Now watching RTR Adrian Senna, who I think still just has to complete his final lap in order for this race to be officially over. Like we said, he's also going to be going home with that extra point, as in the last few laps he managed to take away fastest lap time from his Ferrari partner. He now has the fastest lap time of a 151.90, sidewinding into P1, knowing that he's taking home P1. Great performance from all of these drivers once again today. And there he is, the man that won today, RTR Adrian Senna, winning race number 3 of the Ready to Race GR4 Championship.